Yeah, I kind of feel like I want to hear that person now, but you're stuck with me. So, actually, the privilege is all mine, and it's really great to be here. And one of the things I wanted to say was a huge thank you, not only for sustaining your energy in quite a hot and stuffy room up to this point, but also I know there's lots of childminders in the room, lots of teachers and early years educators, and I know what a huge commitment it takes to come out and commit this time to your professional development. And I'm really thankful for that. Um, Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of the juggling that you'll have had to do to join in today. I know it will have taken a lot. And I'm moaning a bit about feeling tired, but when I'm thinking about it more clearly, there's nothing that requires more energy and commitment than spending that time day in, day out with young children. And that is where it's at. And a really big thank you, a heartfelt thank you from people like me to people like you on the ground working with children every day. So I'm lucky enough to have some of the Islington crew kind of within eyeshot here. So this is King's Cross 2002 when I became head teacher of Cape Greenaway Nursery School and Children's Centre. And one of the things I did quite early on was I went out with my quite low tech digital camera and just took pictures. At the top right there, that's the children's play space in the estate. I did try and find some children playing in it, but there was never a child playing there, so I just gave up in the end and took that picture. That's Kate Greenaway Nursery School, looking rather unloved and uninviting and run down as a space for young children in 2002. But we were really fortunate that the big redevelopment of King's Cross was just about to happen. And we put in lots of bids for planning offset Section 106 money. And it was a very fortunate period uh, to be in. Um, so on the right-hand side, this is the community centre around the back of Cape Greenaway, and they had a toddler drop in there, and toddlers did used to come there with their parents. But look at what a kind of poor space that was um, to be in and to play in. That top left picture, that's the view of Cape Greenaway's garden from the community centre. Okay. So they had this lovely big sliding glass window. And in retaliation, a previous head teacher built an enormous shed there. Um, and to me, that enormous shed, which you can see at the bottom there, was symbolic of this sense that there was a certain nursery school mindset that was a siege mentality. It was like, we've got this lovely garden here and we want to keep everyone away. And so as a result of that, toddlers on the estate ended up at the drop in playing in this really poor environment. Um, and one of the things I really wanted to think about was how do you turn a space into a place? So there's spaces everywhere, but I think of a place as being somewhere that is special to you, where you belong, um, where you've perhaps been part of shaping it. And we were fortunate to work with some really creative designers outdoors, most notably Wendy Titman, whose back you can see there wearing the parka. Um, and the children planted the garden because I felt really convinced that unless they planted it, they wouldn't have any sense of where this garden had come from and why it was important. So we did this kind of Saturday morning planting session, and I'm always incredibly pessimistic about community open events. And I just kind of assumed no one would come and we'd be there for like 12 hours planting everything. But in fact, we were lucky to have some, and the space was full of children with parents, full of children who wanted to plant things. Um, and as you can see, they're including children with some quite complex special educational needs, but who were very much part of that day planting. Um, and there's the children's planting area, which we ended up with, and children watered, grew, ate vegetables there. So this kind of unloved space was becoming a place for children, where children were active in the maintenance and the upkeep and the love of their environment, which was really important, I think. Um, you can see there as well how those kind of open-ended materials like the big hollow blocks and the and the planks allow children to create their own spaces in a very specific and quick way. So we kind of had a policy of not putting anything at all there. It was a bit sad that we had to have AstroTurf there, but the turf, when it was actual turf, just took too much of a hammering. It was a mud bath. It reminded me of childhood days on the rugby pitch. Not happy memories. So we had AstroTurf, but we didn't put anything there. And that created quite a big canvas for the children to make their own places. And the children really occupied the space and made it theirs in a really exciting way. And I guess one of the first things I want to say about play and children is that children respond really well to carefully designed and loved and beautiful environments. And this horrible, grey, degraded space in King's Cross could become a space that children loved and belonged in through lots of hard work by many of us, and that felt really important. But of course, there are controversies and trade-offs, aren't there? So I really wanted the toddlers in the community centre to be in the nursery school for their drop-in. That wasn't easy for us because it's one thing to manage your own group of kids as a teacher, but then to have another group of kids coming in with their parents is much harder work. And I know my popularity dipped sort of to below uh, zero probably at many points during that decision. But I think that, we can't just be concerned about the play of the children who are in our nursery school. We have to think much more inclusively about communities. But it's not easy and there are trade offs. Um, and I also wanted to say that, there you can see the window of one of the flats that bordered the nursery school. So the nursery school wa- was basically in the courtyard of a block of council housing off York Way. Um, and, you know, I'm pretty passionate about children and their right to play and support children being out and about. But truth be told, I'm not sure how much I would like it if my kitchen window was there. And we had shift workers who lived on the estate. Uh, we had people who felt it was okay to fling their window open and query why this child was allowed to do that bit of play and did we know what we were doing. I had a chow mein chucked at me once. Um, it wasn't easy, but it wasn't easy for us, but it also wasn't easy for the people living on the estate. And I think another thing I want to say is we can be really purist about play and belonging and wanting children to be out. But I think we also have to be real that it's quite tough sometimes if you're living in social housing. I had a nice private house in Walthamstow with a front garden. I didn't have to deal with this. And I think it's really important that we're real about the situations that people are in and the reasons why it might be difficult for some people in the community to have this going on. So there was a lot of negotiation that had to happen. And as I said, one of those negotiations did end up with chow mein being thrown over my head. But most of them ended quite amicably, or at least without that happening. Um, I wrote recently in Tes about one of the kids from Kate Greenaway who was a looked after child. And I really remember the day that he was taken into local authority care and I reconnected with him on social media. And one of the incredible things about this child was that they had taken their special book. That's the book where we put pictures and observations of the children's learning together. They had taken this special book from one foster placement to another, to another, to another, to the extent that when this child revisited Kate Greenaway quite recently, they brought their special book with them, and it was pristine, and it was something they had taken from family to family, and this is what they said, um, that the pictures were a way of revisiting some happy times and play. Uh, but the most important thing to Jada was you didn't just take photos of me, you wrote underneath what I said about what I was doing. All my thoughts were there and you listened to me. And that sense of voice and being, I think, is really important when we think about children's play. That book wasn't so much special to Jada because of the photos. It was so special because someone took time to record the thoughts and the responses of Jada to those. Um, and Jada was not an easy child to be with, and there were some high points and some low points. Um, but had an incredible key person who understood why it might be that a young child would be so angry, would find it so difficult to manage routines and boundaries, who constantly hectored the rest of us about the need to walk over hot coals, as she put it, for this child, and never gave up on her, never gave up on her. And I think, again, we can think about play in quite a pure form and just think about the child playing. But it's that adult who went the extra mile for Jada who was really crucial, I think. Um, and you can see that piece in Tez, and you'll understand that I've anonymized that child a huge amount so that uh, there can't be a connection between the adult and the child. Okay, sorry, I was thinking I had a bit more time than that. Am I okay? Okay. So I just wanted to say, we often think about play as being fun or challenging or pretend. Um, and I just wanted to share this clip with Lawrence, who's another child who connected me, well, another young man who connected with me on social media with an autism spectrum condition, or Asperger's as he describes himself. Um, and just listening a bit to Lawrence, I think, reminds us that pretend play and some of the ways we think about play aren't necessarily the important and memorable aspects of being in
Hi,
nursery.
I'm
So
Lawrence. I'm
here's
25, currently live in Leeds, West Yorkshire, also known as God's own country. And I'm going to give a little bit of insight into the initial drive behind the support that I was given before starting primary school and how this support continued throughout my primary school years. So I started out as a very young boy in North London in Haringey, and the early signs were that I was anything but a normal child. The signs that I was quite different, and I was also showing signs of having a learning difficulty, namely Asperger's syndrome, a syndrome I'm very proud to say that I have, but of course was not going to know that I had that at the tender age of 3 years old when I joined Woodlands Park Nursery, which Julian was running at the time. So Julian picked up on this straight away. While the other kids were all kind of together in their groups, playing together, doing their thing, I couldn't handle or didn't want the social interaction at the time. I wanted my own routine, a strict one. I needed to stick to, and that routine was to be by myself and to throw my shoes over the wall into the retirement home next to the nursery. Sometimes got the shoes back. One point I didn't, much to my parents' dismay. As well as this, I was obsessed with the Harry McClary books that were at the nursery, and I needed to read them every single time I was there. The same exact books every time I was there. Julian supported me and allowed me to do this by making me read the books onto a voice recorder. That's so all the other kids would have access to the books in audio form, which would allow me to fulfill that routine I needed to stick to.
so that sense of Lawrence having a job was really important. Pretend play was not an easy thing for him, and it certainly wasn't something he sought out. But having a job and making a contribution, doing something that helped other kids enjoy the Harry McClary books was really important to him. And I often am reminded that, we talk a lot and rightly about play-based learning and the benefits of play-based learning and self-regulation and executive function. Isn't it great that Lawrence found his own route to those things through this self-created job of recording the books and remembering to do it every morning? Um, so that sense that give when we give children those sorts of choices, they may not choose to do what we would think of as play, but they may well choose to do things which are really valuable to their development. Um, I think we also got some things I got some things really wrong during that period, of leadership. So, for example, I don't think we put enough focus on children's communication and language. We were working with, an external consultant who put a lot of emphasis on children's physical play, and that was exciting. But I think as a result of that, we didn't think enough about children's communication and language. Um, and we were too hands off. So we thought we were doing a great job with children's physical development because we had such a lovely garden. And then this chastening experience of being part of a research project where children were randomly tracked through the day, and the discovery that we had a fantastic physical development curriculum for about two-thirds of the children. But another third of the children, because we were very hands off, were actually quite inactive through the day, and we didn't have systems to pick that up. And we were very much taken with the kind of belief system, which is still, I think, quite deeply within early childhood education, that children kind of learnt through their physical interactions with materials alone. So that if you were filling and emptying things in the water tray, you were learning about volume and capacity. Um, and I actually wrote an email to David Whitebread asking him this question at the time. And he was generous enough to send me a very long email explaining in detail why the position I was working with was wrong. And it was a really helpful moment for me. But a lot of these approaches and beliefs are still very strongly held across the sector and potentially quite damaging to some of the children involved. So if I fast forward a bit and go to Sheringham Nursery School and Children's Centre, which is in the Little Ilford area of Newham, that's an area where there's very high levels of overcrowding and very poor quality, often multi-occupied households. This is a piece from The Guardian explaining some of the challenges that Newham's housing team face in Little Ilford. Here you can see that 31.57% of households are overcrowded compared to 6.44% in England. And I mean, the graph is really powerful, but way more powerful than that is going into a multi-occupied house and seeing 5 or 6 kids in one room with maybe a curtain that partly divides that room from a kitchen, which is kind of completely inadequate for family living. Um, and we had to think really carefully about the bridge of a child's experience from that sort of home to a maintained nursery school like Sheringham. So in that sort of home, inevitably there's not much space to play, and there's probably not much to play with. Often neighbours in multi-occupied homes will get very cross with the noise children make when they play. So there's a strong push for children to be quite sedentary and play quietly with one or two things, or watch TV or use a tablet passively. Um, and a nursery school is not a kind of natural environment for a child. You know, the kids are coming into this space where there might be 400 different types of play equipment and a huge outdoor space. And we had to think really hard about what is the bridge from that noisy, overcrowded home where there's not much to play with to this nursery school. How do we help parents bridge the child's move from A to B? How do we advocate for play-based learning, but also accept that we're working with a community that is not particularly struck by play-based learning and is very eager for their children uh, to get on and learn to read and write and do maths quickly. So there had to be a lot of negotiation and bridge building, understanding the premium parents put on education and academic success, but also being uh, assertive but sensitive about what we know about research evidence and how children learn. Um, you can't face a child from that sort of home with the full range of play equipment in a nursery school and just expect it to go okay. That kind of Vygotskian approach of children being the apprentices and learning to play and learning to use quite a restricted set of equipment first before things became fuller um, was really important. So I think that focus on building bridges was really crucial at Sheringham. And again, thinking about spaces to make into places. So this is from the end of the Shrek video, and Bliss is sitting at the back there and is one of the people in that video, which is about conversation with children. But if you've watched the Shrek video, you'll see that at the very end, there's a little snapshot of the children at Forest School. And people have often commented to me that it's very idyllic that we took the children right out into Epping Forest and gave them this fantastic experience. That's actually a strip of land next to the North Circular. And it's noisy and a lot of rubbish blows along it. But partly because of that, it's quite wild and it's quite empty and it's quite natural. And when we found that space, we kind of grabbed it. And it wasn't easy. It's probably still isn't easy to keep that space clean and safe. But we found it and we grabbed it because the children need places, environments.
All the orange oil has come out.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of creative searching for and making of places is really important for children's play, for children's belonging. Um, One of the things I really wanted to do at Sheringham was kind of get beyond the school gate, if you like, and think about the community, that asset-based community development approach where you're connecting with leaders in the community, with families, and really thinking about the assets that you have there. And we built a network of childminders, settings, nursery classes, reception classes, and built projects together where we were really determined that we wouldn't present these as dissemination of good practice from the nursery school as the keeper of some sort of pure approach to young children's learning and development, but that instead we would position ourselves as learning alongside colleagues. So we were all there learning together using this translational research methodology where we're trying to take insights from the science of early childhood development and make them practicable and actionable and real. And out of that came the Shrek approach, which has been used really widely to promote the importance of serve return interactions between practitioners and children, which then built into the Early Years Conversation Project. And excitingly, Maths Through Picture Books, which is also looking like a really nice project. So, really mobilizing research evidence and making it real for practitioners in the immediate community and then scaling up and testing things out in the case of Early Years Conversation Project through a large RCT to see if this approach is effective. And that's really passionately what I think maintained nursery schools, for example, should do, is they should be we should position ourselves as community development and change agents, and we should definitely not just sort of sit behind our fences guarding what we have. So if I just think about some of those reflections really from that time that I spent working frontline those decades, I think the first thing that often gets missed out of these sorts of discussions is that, that early period at Kate Greenaway was really hard for me to survive personally, emotionally. We had a kind of Ofsted inspection on the horizon for that whole first year. And I really struggled emotionally and didn't know who to tell. And it was really hard. I wrote a very melodramatic blog about it called something like The Worst 100 Days of My Life, which, is a bit self-pitying, but it was really grim and really brutal. And it's easy to forget. I visited a nursery quite recently doing incredible work, led by a manager whose pay is unbelievably low, who spends 12, 13 hours a day in that setting, weekends, really goes over and above for the children. And that's the reality on the ground for a lot of people. I never did that, but I really struggled emotionally. It's really hard out there sometimes. I think that it's really made me think about making time and making places for children, and how a child's sense of self can come out of that endeavor, a sense that there is a space that you belong in, a place, and constructing yourself out of those interactions and sense of belonging, um, I feel is really important, and play leads a lot of that. But also the risks of what has been called the unbridled free play approach. I really had to take that on board. And as I said, uh, that email from David Whitebread was a really important moment for learning about that. Um, Kathy, who's in the room, also really seminal in kind of making me understand the shortcomings of that very purist play-based approach, which is still held in a lot of settings. Listening to parents, listening to children, listening to people in the community, and trying to build bridges from where people are to where uh, we are, and that art of compromise and understanding how difficult things can be for parents, for example, in a community like Little Ilford and Manor Park in Newham. Um, Mobilizing. So, what we do individually or in our teams with research evidence can be really impactful, but what if we could mobilize that and do it in much larger collectives? How can we turn this research evidence into something that makes a difference at scale? Because I think we're at a time where we need to make that difference at scale, and it's really important that we mobilize research evidence beyond the boundaries of where we're working. And all of that, I think, is really game changing for the children and their families. And one of the absolute joys of being in a nursery school like Kate Greenaway or Sheringham is just seeing the impact of all of that on the children over time. And for me now, where I live in East London, meeting some of those young adults or getting messages from them is really powerful. Um, it is really game changing for children when we get it right. And I still feel that drive and that passion around that. And I wanted just to end with a final point, which is let's not forget the enormous joy of playing with children and how we can just let ourselves go sometimes when we're with young children, and how much fun that is. And that this is a relational world. It's not all about us giving something to the children. The children give a lot to us when we play with them. This is one of my favorite clips from Outnumbered. Now, if you know Outnumbered, you'll know that it's semi-scripted by the adults, but improvised by the children. And Karen, the actor who played Karen, chose this clip as her favorite moment from Outnumbered.
I'm sorry I shouted at you. That was very wrong of me, wasn't it?
Yes, that was very wrong of you.
You won't leave home again, will you?
Not till morning.
Oh, look out. Here come the other two.
Can we watch a Little Britain?
Have a guess.
Yes.
Have another guess.
I think we should all go up to bed together because it is school tomorrow.
No, not until Dad does his thing.
Thing.
Oh, yeah, don't do it, Dad.
John, no, I can. You must be. I'm gonna do my deed. All right. Or I'll do my thing, but on one condition. And that is as soon as I've done it, we all go straight up to bed, okay?
Okay.
No argument.
Go on, Dad. Okay.
We do.
Go Gozy up. On Dad.
You ready?
Dad. You did the odds for me.
Okay, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Julian, for this really inspiring end to the conference, and bringing it to a very rounded end as well, sharing the realities of what it's like working with young children. I think we are really running out of time. So I think we'll take just one question for Julian from the audience. If there's one. Everybody just wants to go and have a drink.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I was trying to give other people a chance to ask a question, but part of my role as a childminder is really being out on the ground in the community with children. I'm very lucky and privileged that I get to do that. And I've often found that people in the public find it really hard to talk to the children. And it's something I've been trying really hard to work with because people always speak to me. They don't speak to the children. And it feels like people are scared of talking to children now, whether it's because they're going to get accused of something or they just don't know how to speak to children because communities are very different. Children are sent to larger settings and they don't know as many children. So I guess my question is how do you promote more of that through the adult environment? Because children will just go up to people and start talking to them. And I want them to do that. And I want them to have this confidence. But adults seem to be the people who are scared of this. And I don't know how to bridge that. I work with children for a reason. And I don't know how to get adults to break down that barrier other than repeated incidents. But when you work in a community, you might only see that person once. So it's kind of how do we as a society make that space for children? Because that to me is where their place is actually being active members of the community. And if adults are stopping them because they don't know what to do, I feel like that's more systemic than the setting. I don't know if that made sense out loud, but
Yeah.
that's my question.
I think I'd probably be inclined just to leave that as a really powerful point to have made. I don't think I have a good answer for it, but I think it's a great question, which is how have we ended up in this space that uh, adults are sort of fearful of speaking with children. Children are sort of talked over. So adults will talk to the early years educator over the head of their children because of that anxiety. Um, it's not a great place to be.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.